On the morning of March 2nd, 2001, a wall of water 30 meters high, the height of a 10-story building, appeared in the Drake Passage and hit the expedition cruise ship Caledonian Star head-on. It happened in seconds. The bridge windows exploded inward, navigation equipment went dark, communications went silent. The ship was now somewhere between South America and Antarctica, carrying over 200 people, and no one on the outside world knew what had just happened to them. No distress call got through in time. No rescue ship was nearby. The crew had no instruments, no radar, and no radio contact. They had only the engines which, against the odds, kept running. This is the story of what happened that day, how the crew brought the ship back, and why this incident changed how the world understands the ocean. The Caledonian Star was built in 1966 in Bremerhaven, Germany, as a commercial fishing trawler. Its original name was Marburg. It was a heavy, reinforced working vessel, not elegant, but extremely strong. In 1983, it was converted into a passenger expedition ship and eventually came under the ownership of Lindblad Expeditions, one of the leading companies in polar cruise travel. Renamed Caledonian Star, it regularly carried passengers to Antarctica and the Arctic. It was 89 meters long, held up to 169 passengers and 64 crew, and its hull retained the same overbuilt construction from its fishing trawler days, a detail that would later matter enormously. The voyage that ended in the Drake Passage began in Ushuaia, Argentina, the southernmost city on Earth, a small port town in Tierra del Fuego where the Beagle Channel meets the first cold winds from the south. This is where nearly all Antarctic expedition cruises depart from, and in late 2000, the Caledonian Star set off from its docks on what would be a 2-month expedition into the waters around the Antarctic Peninsula. The trip south was, by all accounts, exceptional. The ship pushed further into pack ice than it had gone in previous seasons. Passengers went ashore by inflatable Zodiac boats to walk among penguin colonies, watched humpback whales surfacing off the bow, and listened to onboard naturalists explain what they were seeing. In early January 2001, the ship stopped at the Falkland Islands before heading back into Antarctic waters for the final leg of the expedition. By late February, with the southern summer ending and temperatures falling, it was time to return. The Caledonian Star turned north and entered the Drake Passage, the 800-kilometer stretch of open ocean between the tip of South America and the Antarctic Peninsula. The ship had made this crossing many times before. The crew expected rough seas. The Drake Passage is never calm, but nothing beyond what they had navigated before. The Drake Passage sits in a belt of ocean where the wind circles the entire planet without interruption. There is no landmass between the southern tip of South America and Antarctica to slow it down. Storms here are permanent, not seasonal. The waves they generate travel thousands of kilometers before they arrive, stacking energy the entire way. Sailors have known about this stretch of water for centuries and feared it since the first ships tried to round Cape Horn. What the sailors did not fully understand, and what scientists had not yet proven in 2001, was the phenomenon of rogue waves. A rogue wave is not simply a very large storm wave. It is a wave that forms suddenly when multiple swells converge and amplify each other, creating a single mass of water far larger than anything else in the surrounding sea. Classical oceanographic theory of the 20th century held that such waves were essentially impossible, or so statistically rare as to be irrelevant for practical purposes. Rogue waves were considered maritime legend. The Drake Passage was about to provide evidence to the contrary. The Caledonian Star was making its way north when it hit. No one on the bridge saw it coming with enough time to react. The wave was estimated at approximately 30 meters. Some accounts say closer to 27, others higher. Whatever the precise measurement, it was roughly 3 times the height of the surrounding swells, and it struck the ship without meaningful warning. The wave hit the bow and ran the full length of the vessel. On the bridge, located high above the main deck, every window was destroyed simultaneously by the pressure and weight of the water. The electronics behind those windows, the navigation systems, the radar, the radio equipment, the satellite communications, were flooded and destroyed within seconds. The crew on the bridge were thrown and soaked. Below, passengers were thrown from seats and beds. Objects flew across cabins and corridors. The sound was described later as catastrophic, a deep, physical impact rather than just a noise. When it was over, the ship was still floating, but the bridge was open to the weather, its instruments were dead, and no signal had gone out. The first decision the captain had to make was the most important one: which direction to point the ship. In heavy seas, a vessel that goes broadside to the waves, parallel to them, is at extreme risk of rolling over. The correct move is to keep the bow facing into the swells, absorbing the impact forward rather than sideways. Without working navigation equipment, holding that heading required the experience and judgment of the crew alone. The engines were running. That single fact was the difference between a survival situation and a disaster. The Caledonian Star could still move, still steer, still fight for position in the sea. The crew held the bow into the waves and began working through the damage. There were no fatalities. There were no serious injuries among the passengers or crew. The hull, that old, heavy, overbuilt fishing trawler hull, had not been breached. The ship was damaged badly, but structurally intact. Through emergency communications equipment that survived the wave, or pieced together from partial systems, a distress signal eventually reached the Argentine Navy base at Ushuaia. The vessel sent to assist was the ARA Alferez Sobral, a military ocean tug that had served the Argentine Navy since 1972. It had been built in the United States in 1944 and transferred to Argentina decades later, and it carried its own history of conflict. During the Falklands War in 1982, it was hit by British missiles and lost crew members in one of the war's naval engagements. Now it was heading south into the Drake Passage to find a civilian ship navigating without instruments. The Sobral located the Caledonian Star and escorted it north. 3 days after the wave struck, on approximately March 5, 2001, the Caledonian Star arrived in Ushuaia. All passengers and crew were accounted for. The ship was repaired, its bridge rebuilt, and its equipment replaced. In June 2001, the ship was renamed Endeavour and continued operating Antarctic expeditions for Lindblad Expeditions and later under the National Geographic banner, sailing until 2017 before being scrapped, 51 years after it was first launched as a fishing boat. What made March 2001 more than just one dramatic survival story was the discovery that the Caledonian Star was not alone. Just days earlier, the MS Bremen, another expedition cruise ship operating in the Southern Ocean roughly 1,000 kilometers away, was struck by a wave of nearly identical size. The Bremen was less fortunate in one critical way. The impacts knocked out all power on board. The ship went dark and drifted sideways to the swells for 2 full hours while the crew attempted to restart the engines. According to the German oceanographer Wolfgang Rosenthal, who later studied both incidents, the Bremen's crew stated plainly that during those 2 hours, they believed they were going to die. The engines eventually restarted. The Bremen survived. 2 ships, 2 30-meter rogue waves, 1 week, the same region of ocean. The back-to-back incidents triggered a formal scientific response. The European Space Agency launched a project called MaxWave, using satellite radar to scan the surface of the world's oceans, specifically looking for extreme wave events. In 3 weeks of scanning, the satellites detected more than 10 waves exceeding 25 meters in height. The conclusion was direct and impossible to argue with. Rogue waves were real. They were not rare, and the statistical models that had governed ship design for decades were wrong. Ships were not being built to withstand the kind of wave that hit the Caledonian Star and the Bremen, because the official science said those waves did not occur with any meaningful frequency. The EU funded further research under the Extreme Seas Project from 2009 to 2013, resulting in new international recommendations for ship construction and bridge window strength standards. The Caledonian Star incident is cited in that research as one of the key documented cases. The Drake Passage does not always allow crossings to end this way. In November 2022, the cruise ship Viking Polaris was hit by a rogue wave in the same waters, and one passenger died. The ocean that the Caledonian Star crossed in March 2001 is still out there, unchanged, waiting for the next ship to make the same bet. On that day in 2001, the bet paid off. The Caledonian Star came home.